It's time to talk Gonzaga basketball.
Get ready.
It's the Spokesman-Review Zags Insiders Podcast.
Here we go.
Hello and welcome back to the Zags Basketball Insiders Podcast. I'm Jim Meehan, Gonzaga beat writer for the Spokesman-Review. Richard Fox alongside. He's the television analyst for GU games on KHQ, SWX, and Root. And well, it was another big week in the books for the Gonzaga program. We're here to recap it all. The St. Mary's win, game days visit, a look ahead to senior night on Wednesday, and then the WCC tournament. So first off, the AP rankings came out this morning. The Zags are back in the top 10 at number 10. St. Mary's dropped a couple of spots to 17. In the net rankings, which became all important after Gonzaga won on Saturday and shared the top with St. Mary's at 7. So that gives the Gales the top seed in Las Vegas. The Zags will be the number 2. Both will be off until next Monday's semifinals at the Orleans Arena. We'll talk a little bit more about the tournament, but first, Richard, let's go back through San Diego. Zags win that one 97-72. They're up 17 at half, shot about 55% for the game. Probably would have scored 100 if the game was tighter. Kind of what I thought anyway. San Diego's advertised they can score it a little bit. They've got some individual players that can put the ball in the hole, but they could not slow down Timme, Strawther, and company on that night.
No, and I know we want to keep the recap here pretty quick. You know, USC just seemed like a really slow team to me. And Gonzaga just plays so quickly, both in transition, but even in the half court, they make quick decisions. It really struck me for USD just how methodical they were. Unlike St. Mary's, where I think there's a plan to that strategy. It just they don't have the athletes, both, you know, up and down the floor, laterally, vertically, to really play with GU. So, you know, I was really impressed with Gonzaga's ability to dominate, you know, in the inside and be consistent with that. They shot over 70% from inside the arc. They struggled from three. You know, that kind of carried over to Saturday night as well. But that defense, you know, you've been on this since for a while now, or certainly before I started considering it. They're certainly changing their identity defensively, and we saw that against San Diego for really large stretches. I mean, San Diego only got 2 free throws, and it's not just the ability to defend at a high level, but to do so without fouling. I thought they were really disciplined in that area, and USD shot a good percentage from 3 and from the field, but just couldn't get anything easy. You know, even some of those shots that went in, I thought were well contested.
Yeah. Lavin has a big job down there. New head coach Steve Lavin, a guy that used to watch on broadcast as an analyst, and then before that, the head coach at UCLA. But he does have a good recruiting ability, I think, proven in the past, and brought in a bunch of transfers there at San Diego. Didn't work out in large part because they cannot stay healthy. They've had just a bad run of injuries, but be interesting to see what he does down the road. Let's move on to the main event. Saturday night in a crazy environment in the Kennel. Game day in town. They sat courtside and watched, and I think did some updates from on the floor while teams were warming up. Foxy, did you get up to watch the show, or did you watch it on replay later? How did you handle game day morning?
Well, I've got 6-year-old twins, so I was up. Actually, they shockingly were okay with that being on the television instead of some sort of show that they would normally want to watch on a Saturday morning. So I thought it was a really, you know, they always do a good job, but you know, there's something about it when you've got a personal connection to the university and the community that they're highlighting. I thought it was really well done, and it certainly was really impressive to hear Steph Davis, Greenberg, and others talk about how impressed they were with the turnout and the energy. You know, I think both of them said it was the best one they've had this year and maybe in quite a few years. So, you know, last week we talked about just how big a deal it is. And while I'm watching, just couldn't help but think about recruits. and the clips you could take about what they would talk about with GU, the fans that were there, so on and so forth. My hope is obviously that it's a bit of a catalyst for them as they kind of move into the off season and help try to maybe turn the page for some of the guys on this team that may not be here next year.
Yeah, I asked around. No recruits in town on visits. I don't think that's unusual, only because it's middle of February and or late February, and you've got teams in their district playoffs and state tournaments. And those are the kind of guys the Zags are recruiting that are still playing. So not the easiest time to get away and come up, but you can bet the ones they're looking at will see, or we're watching on Saturday. And I do believe they send a videotape out of the environment and the locker rooms, the Volker, all the, selling points facility-wise to players. So just another a good vehicle for them to get into homes on a 2-hour morning show that sets the table for college basketball. Foxy, the game itself, another interesting.
Jim, before we get in the game, talk to us about the environment, the actual environment in the game. That hour leading up to tip and all that. I mean, I wasn't there. Was it everything that people thought it would be?
It was ready to go. It was alive in there. And you don't get that every time out in the kennel. Obviously, some of the games when they're favored by 20 or 30. You get it for North Carolina. You get it for Michigan State. You get it for the Gales, BYU, those kind of games, Arizona. But this one was electric in there. It was loud. The students, they must have got a good nap in after the morning session, because they brought it from the minute the 60 minutes on the clock, the countdown goes on, the score clock. They were ready to go. And the game, I got away a little bit from St. Mary's early. The Zags were up 19, I think, late in the first half, 18 in the second half. Maybe turned the dial down on the volume just a touch at that point. But as the Gales do, they came back, made it very interesting. A little bit like the first game, the Zags were in control most of the way. I think one of the biggest differences was, that lead was so big, they were able to kind of ward off. St. Mary's had a couple of comebacks in about the final 10, 12 minutes. And they had enough of a cushion that made it a lot easier. That, and they stopped Aiden Mahaney outside of about 4-minute stretch there. We had, I think, 7 or 8 of his points. The other 32 minutes, he was not much of a factor. I think those were the two biggest things that kind of went into that victory on Saturday night. What'd you see, Foxy?
Yeah, and I think we talked about it last week. Just, if Gonzaga can get that kind of cushion, it's just a different exercise for St. Mary's up here than it is at their place. Gonzaga's plus 14 in the paint. You saw the dominance of Timme and Watson. It was interesting to see Bennett go with Jefferson instead of Saxon. I mean, Saxon just played 17 minutes. I thought he was really effective down in Moraga, and he struggled with fouls. And I'm not sure if that's just Jefferson's a little bit more skilled, particularly around the perimeter, and he's a good athlete, but he certainly doesn't have the size inside. But he wasn't nearly as effective Saxon when he was in the game against Timme. But I thought that was noticeable. And Gonzaga made their free throws down the stretch, 12 of 13 in the second half. They were 85% for the game. Again, they struggled from three, less than 30% from the three-point line, but just absolutely dominant inside the arc, shooting 63%. So, when you've got the ability to be that effective at the rim or inside the arc, and you make your free throws, that makes it a lot easier to weather a night or a weekend where you don't shoot the ball particularly well from three. Not that Watson needed to do it, but he certainly, in my mind, solidified himself as an all-league guy. I think we've known that for a while now, but he was really, really impressive. And then it was just kind of this balance across the board. Hickman, 9 points, but he was really impactful in the first half in particular. He had some timely shots. I think he really made St. Mary's guard him in a way that maybe they didn't anticipate they'd have to, given the fact he hasn't shot it great over the last few weeks hasn't scored at a high clip. If you're going to leave somebody alone on the perimeter, it's probably him, based on at least on the numbers. But he certainly made them pay. And Smith, I've been really impressed with him all year. I'm not sure he's gotten the consistency as far as opportunities go that his talent level probably deserves. I think sometimes it's human nature. You go with the ones you know. And I think that started early in the year. And I don't think he had the longest leash. If he wasn't making shots, I'm not sure everything else he did was considered as valuable as maybe I did. But he's been looking for a moment, and he's had some, but that was a huge moment. Not just his ability to score the ball, 13 points, one of the few guys the only guy really on the perimeter that was consistently making shots, but his defense. I mean, you saw his strength. I mean, he's all a 6'4". He's not the most vertical athlete, but he's really good guarding positionally. That block he had on Mahaney was really well timed. So it takes more than Timme, and we've been talking about that all year. It feels like the last 3 or 4 weeks, or rather 3 or 4 games, they're starting to get that balance. We saw Watson maybe, as the start of the conference play got going, he found his footing, and we now know what to expect from Anton every night. Strawther's turned a corner, didn't shoot it well, but when your guys coming in averaging 27, 25 a game, he drew so much attention for St. Mary's. Even when he's missing shots, you have to honor his ability to score. And then now you've got a guy like Smith coming off the bench who, he's not. I'm not comparing him as a 6 starter in the same way Nembhard was for that team that went to the national championship. But he's a starter level player on this roster coming off your bench. That's a really nice luxury to have.
Well, I was really kind of fascinated by the chess match between the coaches, too. There was a lot of maneuvering going on in that game. St. Mary's really changed how they guarded Strawther, I thought. Julian mentioned it after the game. Not many open threes for him. In fact, I think one of them he took was about 26, 27 feet. And then on the ball screen with Julian, the ball handler, they really did not allow him to do much, trying to turn the corner, get his own, use the pick and roll, those kind of things. Randy Bennett also talked about, trying to kind of slough off of Watson on the perimeter, which a lot of teams have done. But he made him pay with a 3-pointer. And I thought from the Zags end, you had a real long stretch, maybe 3-4 minutes in the final closing down in crunch time, where Anton was playing 5, Timme was on the bench with 4 fouls, and they went small ball. You're seeing that small ball line up a little more out of them the last 2-3 weeks, and I thought that helped them hold on. There's a lot of maneuvering going on in that game, and I think it was almost it was like a chess match. You move this guy here, I'm going to move this guy here. Jefferson, same situation. At one end, I thought he hurt the Zags. At the other end, maybe that's what led to a lot of the Zags' paint points inside. So, Anton, we've talked about Anton forever, and it's like a broken record. The guy's just had a memorable season, and at both ends, that small ball lineup is intriguing. I think you're going to see more of it down the road, especially defensively. He's able to switch so well and guard that pick and roll. It kind of changes their look defensively. He's really, I think he stamped himself on the all-league team for sure, and he's got to be right there with Logan Johnson for player of the year. But he just does so many things, very few mistakes over 30-plus minutes. And remarkable what he's doing.
Yeah, Anton, he rarely takes a shot that you question. It feels it's always within what they're doing. They don't call a lot for him, but he's opportunistic. Timme draws so much attention that he's able to kind of, I think it went from him kind of cleaning up the scraps to now taking real advantage with how he moves away from the ball, getting position early. And now he's just more confident looking for a shot. I mean, even the start of the year, if he had a one-on-one situation from 15 feet, I mean, he's looking to kick it out to half court. And now he'll look at the rim and he'll make a play. That small ball lineup, we've seen that in the past from Mark. I think in years past, some of those seasons, it was just out of necessity, not having a lot of depth up front. I think this year they clearly have two guys in Anton and Timme that are high level. I mean, obviously Drew is all kind of all world, particularly offensively, but Anton is about as good as you're going to hope to get from that power forward center spot in college basketball. I mean, just his consistency, as you said, his ability to score it now, rebound, so on and so forth. But that you can do the small ball deal if you've got wings and guards that can hold up. And they have that length with Strawther, we've seen him in the past play that four spot, just like Kispert did. And then Smith's ability, despite only being 6'4", I mean, most folks would love to be 6'4", but at this level, as you get into the tournament, that's not overly, he's not incredibly tall, but he's such a strong kid. And he's so good just defending positionally that it allows you to go small if you need to, based on the circumstance. And we saw it with Anton against St. Mary's, I think in part because of Drew's foul trouble, but we're going to see that down the stretch with Drew at that 5 spot and 4 guards around him. I think it's really difficult to defend.
Yeah, and Smith is big enough to guard a wing if he has to.
Mm-hmm.
He's big enough, strong enough. Strawther, same way, to go get 7, 8 boards. I think Smith had 5 the other night.
Yep.
So you can still, you're not giving away offensive boards time after time if those guys can keep it up on the glass. So I think they might be seeing, we might be seeing something that carries over to the WCC tournament into the NCAA tournament at times. It's just a different look, really different look in a lot of ways, both ends of the floor. So one other thing we'll hit on the St. Mary's game, the guard play, we've mentioned this before, is a mixed bag. That was the perfect illustration of it the other night. You had, Malachi was huge, 13 points off the bench. The starting backcourt, Vizier Bolton really didn't have a chance. He twisted his ankle there about 2 minutes in, kept playing, and actually hit a pretty nice shot at elbow jumper in maybe 4-minute mark. That was big, and played good defense when he was in, but I think he was just kind of limited by his ankle after that. And Malachi playing great, so maybe that took some of the minutes. But you had Nolan Hickman, slow start, then he came on. You had Hunter Salas opposite. He had the great start. I think he had a nice drive and finish and a 3-ball, but then kind of tailed off. And for one of the rare times, noticed some defensive mistakes from Hunter, not where he was supposed to be, or at least in rotation. He doesn't do that very often, so that's certainly nitpicking. But that guard line and Strawther we talked about had a tough night. I think Strawther's night would have looked a lot different if he made those 3 just almost layups or close range shots in the first half. His stat line looks different. His confidence was different. But that guard line, even with all the ups and downs, they got 25 wins. They got a co-championship. They're in the top 10. It's almost, I guess it shows you just what Timme Watson and for the most part Strawther have done. And there is an ability, whether it's one guy one night or another guy the next night, they seem to find 1 or 2 out of that mixture of the 4 backcourt guys come through. You don't know who it's going to be. Mark Few doesn't know who it's going to be. I'm sure that has them scratching their head, but able to find that and still kind of keep the train moving forward at the guard position.
Yeah, well, look, GU 7 turnovers against St. Mary's, a team that does a good job turning you over. 4 of those were from Strawther and Timme. So your backcourt effectively 3 turnovers against the best defensive team in the league, maybe the best defensive team on the West Coast. If you're not going to be a value add scoring the ball, don't hurt us by coughing it up, the ball. Don't turn it over and defend. And, so in other words, you may not be the reason we win, but definitely don't be the reason we might lose. And I thought those guys came in, Bolton, Salas were solid. They didn't necessarily score the ball. But to your point, both had brief moments, but they didn't hurt you. They did their job while they were in the game, and I think that's the bar. We just every night we need that from you. You might have it going from 3 if you're Bolton. on any given night. Salas, we need you to guard every night. You might knock down a shot or two, great. But, we need to know these other things are going to be there every night. And I think they're kind of getting to that place with them. But you're absolutely right. It's a bit of a roll of the dice every game.
Yeah.
We've been talking about this now a couple weeks. The trio of Strawther, Watson, and Timme, I think we all feel pretty good that they're going to be there on Wednesday night and then at the tournament, right? We just you expect those three. It's those other four in Hickman, Bolton, Smith, and Salas as who's it going to be that night, and you just don't know. And I think do we need to throw Greg into the mix there in that rotation? He's had some big moments this year, but his minutes obviously depend on a lot, matchups as well as foul trouble. So, yeah, it's you wish you had a little more consistency. I'm hoping that was a moment Smith needed, though, Jim, to maybe bring that confidence every night. And I'm hoping that's also the moment the staff may have needed to recognize that maybe we need to give him 25 minutes a night. He may not be giving us 13 from offensively, but just everything else he does. He rebounds at a high level. He's not a quick defender, but he just has a way to have an impact on that end of the floor. And he moves it well, and he can play the point for you a little bit. So, maybe he's the guy of that group. I don't know. We'll see.
No, I think you're right. I think he to use a Seinfeld term, I think he's in the circle of trust. Is that the Seinfeld or
no?
I think
you're thinking old school, but I love the attempt at the reference.
Yeah,
oh, that's
I think
a great
he's
reference.
entering the circle of trust even more. So, they score 77. The Gales give up 58 a game. They shoot over 50%. Didn't shoot it well from three, but not many turnovers. And they did that with, Timme had 19. That's not even quite to his average. Strawther, 10 or 11. Those are their two best offensive weapons. And they still put up the second highest total against St. Mary's all year. They gave up 78 to the Loyola Marymount in a loss, but that was overtime. They gave up 70 to the Zags in a win. That was overtime. And then 70 to Oral Roberts. So, and I don't think other than Colorado State, that's the highest shooting percentage against St. Mary's this year. So it all added up. It may not have been what you thought going into the game, but it added up to the way Gonzaga wanted. Well, let's move on to senior night on Wednesday. I was looking through the game notes before the game against St. Mary's, and there was a section on the next opponent, and it mentioned that you're going to have four players honored: Timme, Watson, Bolton, Malachi. All but I think Regier has used 5 years now with his extra COVID year this year, but the other three technically have the ability to return for another year if they so choose. Then what struck me as I looked at the roster, I had not noticed this. Foxy, I haven't been doing my reading, I guess. Malachi Smith is listed as a redshirt junior on Gonzaga's roster, which I don't know if that's an indication he's coming back or he's played, I think, 1 year at Wayne State and at least two at Chattanooga and this year. So he does have the option either way, but I thought it interesting redshirt junior. That stuck out to me. Who knows? Senior night's always an interesting dynamic, let's say. And I think with Chicago State, they're going to be heavily favored. Maybe it's not going to require the 100% total dialed in focus that you would have had if it was St. Mary's being the senior.
Right.
That's why you have it. And then you've got kind of the emotional and every type of leader for him. And Drew Timme could be his last game. I'm guessing it probably is. Who knows? Watson, the quiet guy. Bolton, the quiet guy. But Watson, a hometown guy. So he's going to have a lot of people watching. And then Malachi, another kind of quiet guy. First, I'll ask you, what was your senior night like? What any prominent memories from it, and how emotional could that get when Drew and Anton take the mic after that game?
Well, we had a pretty cool senior night. It was the last game of the old kennel.
Oh, moved
in. Yep. And then we played Santa Clara. It was pretty good at the time. I think we beat them up pretty good. We had 5 seniors on that group in that class, which was a lot of fun. Blake Stepp, Tony Skinner, Kyle Bankhead, and Corey Violet, and obviously myself. And that was a pretty close group. So, 5 seniors starting in the game. All of us could play. All of us on scholarship, and it was a lot of fun. So, I did. I'd like to think that even at that age, I had a pretty good perspective about, being in college and the moments that we were living through. But it was exciting, it was fun, and then it was over, and it was like, whose house are we going to again? I mean, so I'm not sure. I think it's more emotional for those around the players. I think generally speaking, than the players themselves. That comes later, whenever you're done, and the whole experience. You start considering that moment as part of the entirety of your experience at GU. So, but there'll certainly be some nerves, and if you don't know if you're coming back, that'd be a weird position to be in. If you know you can come back, but you're not sure you're coming back, what is that I can't relate to. So I don't know, but yeah, I'm in your camp. I would be really surprised to see Drew come back. I mean, he's going to be the all-time leading scorer. His numbers in the NCAA tournament are remarkable. I mean, he's sustained this program and moved it to another level. I don't know. They don't need to wait to put his number up on the wall. They can go and do that Wednesday night if they have that ready to go. And at some point, I remember feeling this. I was a 5-year guy as well because I sat out a year. You're ready to move on from just college. Yeah. Even though there's no place like campus land, but even then, at some point, you're just ready to do something different. And if you have aspirations to play professionally, whether it be in the NBA or Europe or wherever it might be, that becomes a draw. The idea of, can I make a living for a while playing it? Can I go do something else on the floor, have a different experience? And I would imagine that's the biggest challenge if the staff is trying to convince these kids to come back, is just, it's just not fresh anymore, and that you don't get tired of winning and you don't get tired of being at GU, but you just want something else. And I would imagine that's a conversation. Bolton's done, but for the other 3, you've been in college for a while now. Do you want to do something else? Is it going to be as much fun as it has been to come back for another year? And I suspect all 3 of those guys will wait about as long as they can before they make that decision.
It's funny. Every opponent and all the national media, they kind of give Drew static for being here forever. He is a 4th-year senior.
Yeah.
Anton is a 4th-year senior. I'm sure WCC opponents think these guys have been there since the beginning of time. But actually, Drew's just right on schedule, 4th year. And
well, I think COVID felt like 2 years, right? Every COVID year. So there's something about that.
Yeah, no question. But we'll see what those guys do. Kind of looking forward to Drew's speech. I hope the audience, and again, it's Chicago State. It's not going to be anywhere near the environment of Saturday night. But I hope the crowd recognizes fully what he's done. I mean, he is his offensive talent and ability for all 4 years, but particularly these last 3 when he started. All-American status, almost guaranteed for 3 straight years, record books, all that. And Anton, same way, a guy who went, in the starting lineup early, out, back in, lost the job to Nemhard in the undefeated year till the title game. He has done whatever they've asked. He's gotten better. He's made big progress this year. Rozier Bolton, just as steady as you go, 2 years, solid, both ends of the floor. And then a 1-year guy with Malachi who's really kind of doing about as well as you can do in that 6-man role, especially lately. I hope the crowd recognizes all those things with those guys, especially Drew and Anton.
Well, Anton, hometown kid, it's he deserves all the shine he can get. And then with Drew, I guess it depends on how you define what qualifies you to be on the Mount Rushmore of Gonzaga basketball. But if you are defining it based on the quality of a player's career, there's no doubt that Drew Timme's on that list. I think of guys like Kevin Pangos, Elias Harris, guys who were here for 4 or 5 years that are all up and down these record books and had a real impact on winning. This is in fact the last time you get to see him at home put on a Zaga uniform. To your point, I hope the crowd recognizes that, and that despite the fact it's Chicago State and we're not spending a lot of time thinking about them, and I had to call that game. It's a pretty cool experience to be able to say goodbye to a guy who's probably not coming back, but who's obviously been a huge player in the history of this program.
Yep, no doubt. And I think he almost has to be on the Zags Rushmore. I think he's been that good. And there's a lot of candidates for that when you think about it.
I know.
Going back to the original legends, Frank Burgess and John Stockton. So.
Well, I think you have to cut it off in like the modern era, the Mark Few era, right? I think that would be too hard, but that might be an interesting thought exercise for you and the spokesman to put together. Like, who is on the Mount Rushmore?
Well, Foxy, let me help you out with your broadcast on Wednesday. Chicago State.
Yeah, please do.
11 and 18, coming here. Well, they're independent. They used to be in the WAC, I believe, but now they're independent. So that helps explain why they're able to come across the country here and pick up a pretty good paycheck to play the Zags instead of preparing for a conference tournament themselves. Don't know much else about them other than they hung close with Stanford, hung with Minnesota, who's not having a particularly good year in the Big Ten. And I think they lost by 14 to Xavier at one point. So we'll see what Chicago State brings. Let's move on to the WCC tournament. As we mentioned, the seeds were finalized at the top and throughout the bracket. You've got St. Mary's at 1, Gonzaga at 2. Santa Clara is the 3 seed. Pretty strong finish for Herb Sendek's guys. And then you've got LMU at 4, BYU is 5, USF 6, Pacific 7, Portland, San Diego, and Pepperdine to finish it off. The Zags side of the bracket, and that's where you kind of have a plus or minus with how you view the brackets. As the 2 seed, they're not going to run up against Loyola or BYU unless it's the final. And the other side of the bracket makes it all the way through. They probably will run up against Santa Clara. That team only has to win 1 game to move into the semis. And here the Broncos are with 7-game winning streak, longest in the conference. On the other side of the bracket, St. Mary's likely will have to deal with either BYU or LMU. LMU beat both teams, the Zags and St. Mary's, so they obviously will come in with a fighting chance. BYU seems to play everybody tough, especially the Zags. What do you make of the bracket? You got to do work anyway, and you're going to play a good team anyway, but I don't think it turned out as bad as maybe it could have for Gonzaga.
No, oddly enough, being there once, he might have been a bit more challenging. I mean, is Santa Clara that you're worried about? And did you say San Francisco's on their side too?
They're 6 seeds. So, yeah, technically, I think they could run into USF. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, those would be the 2 that, I think I'd sit down and watch and think, well, it'd be something interesting could happen here. But, Pajemski always makes you a little nervous. He scores it at enough of a clip that if he gets going on a neutral court, and they've got enough size with Braun and I can't remember the other kid's name. Always escapes me. Bediako, thank you. And Justice can knock down the 3-point shot. They certainly didn't feel very good about how they played up here. when Gonzaga returned the favor after a tough game down there. And then, for San Francisco, same thing. But, it's that's the beauty of this deal. Gonzaga is going to certainly have all the motivation in the world to win that tournament. It's, they're trying to play for a high seed. They want to, complete, they want another opportunity to show that they're better than St. Mary's, all that good stuff. But for these teams like St. Mary's, LMU, Santa Clara, San Francisco, LMU, that have all had these moments in league and are all disappointed that they didn't have a more consistent regular season where they would have maybe found themselves. BYU can throw them in the mix. They've got an opportunity now. If we can get hot for 3 nights or 4 nights, depending where they're at, who knows what could happen.
Yeah.
And there's that level of desperation. And, what I have found, having been on that side of it, when I was at the University of Colorado, is you play really loose. There's a freedom to not having any real expectations, but having all the motivation in the world to play well. And so Gonzaga is I don't think this is a tournament where they just roll through teams. I think they're going to get a couple tough games out of Vegas, which has been what they've had for the most part in league play. And quite frankly, I think you want that going into the tournament. I mean, you're going to have about a week off, if not longer, right? So, yeah. I think you want to keep being tested. You don't want to have 2 weeks where you just run through everybody and all of a sudden you got to flip that switch on again.
Yeah, I think the team's capable of getting to Gonzaga and St. Mary's in the semis and then advancing even. I think the two that are capable of it, Santa Clara, they have a very good starting 5. The way the tournament is set up, they would play Saturday night, have Sunday off, then play Monday, Tuesday if they were to keep advancing. LMU, I think, could do it. Although, man, it's hard to get that 108-65 game out of my head that the Zags put on them. Until then, though, tough-minded, 2 really good individual guys in Shelton and Kelly Leapepe. They got some other guys capable of it, but I still think when it comes down to it, it's going to be round 3 Gonzaga St. Mary's, and it'll be another fist fight battle royale down in Vegas. But who knows? A lot of surprises this year in college hoops, so we'll see how it plays out.
I don't disagree with you. I'd expect that too.
Yeah. Well, let's do one more. We'll wrap it up with the WCC awards. They come out later this week. My guess, I'll go first, or have you add your picks here at the end. We'll do kind of the main categories. Player of the year. I think there's a newcomer, a defensive player of the year, coach of the year. So let's start out with player of the year. To me, that is done. I think the guy can engrave it on the trophy. I think it's been done for weeks.
Go ahead, do it now.
I think, look, Logan Johnson had a tremendous finish to the season. Great player. Pajemski's got great stats. Drew Timme, body of work. Just the torture he's put on a lot of these teams in the WCC with his spin moves and footwork.
You're not looking for me to argue with you, right? Like,
no,
we're not doing like a hot take session here. Okay.
Yeah, no, I think we might might be unanimous on this. I'm going Timme. You're going
Timme.
Okay, let's move on. Defensive player to me is very interesting. You've got
I would agree.
Anton has had a tremendous year. I looked up the numbers. I wrote a little bit about it. He's got 50-some steals at 52 or 56 something this year. That's in the top 10 individuals with a bunch of guards on that list, led by John Stockton. He's already in the top 10, I think, with your former teammate Blake Stepp at 10. His career total is up there, like 8th. He's behind Suggs, I think. Or no, that's season. I'm sorry, I had that reversed. But anyway, he's on both lists already. Not to mention his, he blocks shots. His help side. I thought his help side against St. Mary's, he stoned Mahaney on a drive. He kept, keeping the guards out. Other than Logan Johnson, he was very impressive in that aspect as well. But Logan Johnson's got a great case too. He's just tough as nails, both ends of the floor, tough-minded. They've got another great defender in Kyle Bowen. I think does a great job. I think they'll nominate Logan, and rightfully so. This is a guard-oriented league most of the time, and he's done a great job. I'm guessing Logan might get it. That's how I think the coaches will vote. That's kind of hard for me, just having seen Anton play 30 games or whatever and his impact. But I think in a narrow vote, they'll go with Logan over Anton. What do you think?
If I had a vote, I'd probably go Bowen.
Oh.
He's top 5 in rebounds, top 10 in steals. He doesn't score it at all, but there's a lot of Anton in him, and that he can get switched out on a smaller player and allows them to switch some of that. Plus, he's got to guard guys like Timme when Saxon's is in foul trouble. I mean, it's a difficult call. I mean, I think that has to come from the best defensive team in the league by a mile. That's their identity. As great as Anton is, and from a defensive efficiency perspective, I mean, that'd be an interesting exercise to just compare what Anton's done, both in the league, but also in the history of this program, given his position. I mean, you talked about it earlier. As impactful a defender as they've had in a long, long time. Yeah. But I have to. You can go with Johnson. I think I'd go with Bowen, even though I know it's not as obvious. But just having watched them play enough this year, not just against Gonzaga, I think his impact, his ability to rebound, all that good stuff. That's probably who I'd vote for.
It's great matchups when Watson goes against Bowen, or Bowen goes against Timme or Watson. Those are just great to watch. Yeah. Fun. Move on. Coach of the year. I think Randy Bennett's going to get it. Probably should get it, in my opinion. He's done a tremendous job down there again. I think there's only 2 others that are in the mix. Herb Sendek with what Santa Clara has done to 23 wins, I believe, and 11-5 in league. Yeah. He's in the neighborhood, and I think Stan Johnson has done. I think they were picked 9th at Loyola Marymount, and he's got them in the top 4 with a couple of huge wins. But I think what Randy's done is going to stand up, and he'll get the Coach of the Year. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree with you, but I do think it's worth giving Sendek and Johnson some credit, and Mark obviously as well. I mean, it becomes a little bit. Look, we take it for granted every year they're there, but this is in Mark's, to make a case for a few. They lost 2 NBA players last year, 3 or 4 the year before. They really had to retool. They're not as good on the top end as they've been, and here they are, tied for first in the league, 25-5, all of the things. I think it's been a heavier lift this year than he's had probably in the last 5, and they've figured it out how to put all the pieces together and be where they are. But I agree with you. I think Bennett will get it. I do think what Johnson's done at LMU has been really impressive. Yeah, and I think Santa Clara. It reminds me of what Portland did under Reveno, where they got to the point where they were winning 20 games a year every year. I think they had a 3 or 4 year stretch, but they were never able to take that next step where they were really in a position to challenge Gonzaga or St. Mary's, or at the time BYU. I think Sendek can do that. When you look at who he has, who's coming back, and the investment Santa Clara has made into athletics there, where they are in California, all those good things. I'll be really interested to see where they are next year, because I do think he's got them at a different level, a level they haven't been at in a long time.
Yeah, and turning out pros. The Williams kid last year, I believe it was a lottery pick, and I think the Brandon Pajemski, the transfer from Illinois, has got a chance. I'm seeing him on draft boards now.
Yeah,
and that brings us to our last award. I think it's called newcomers, not freshman of the year anymore. I think it's newcomers, so transfers are eligible. I think there's 2 maybe lead candidates in that regard. Pajemski from Santa Clara. and then Mahaney from St. Mary's, the freshman, who's got good numbers. He's in 14-point range, and two real, marquee performances, hitting the game winner against BYU on the road, and then kind of taking over against the Zags down in Moraga and leading them to two of their biggest wins. I still think it's Podziemski. The kid rebounds. He's like 6'4", 6'5", maybe, but I think he's around 8 or 9 boards a game. He's incredible. He scores it, shoots it. His first 2 games at Santa Clara, I think he was in the 30s right out of the gate. I'm going with him as the newcomer of the year. Who do you got?
Easy call. Yeah, I think Podziemski, as good as Mahaney's been. What Podziemski's done at Santa Clara is kind of, I don't know if it's off the, historic for the league the last 5 or 6 years from a guy coming in. I mean, didn't play at all in Illinois. Yeah. Not a super high level recruit, that kind of thing. And he's been good all year. So I'm curious though, Jim, how many Zags on the first team?
I got 3.
Me too.
I think it's got to be Timme, Strawther, or Locks. And I think Watson has played himself into that as well. It's a 10-man first team in the WBC. And I think his numbers may not look as good as some of them that are, ahead of him in rebounding or ahead of him in scoring. His impact definitely puts him
I
in.
agree.
You got 3? Okay.
I got those exact 3, yep.
All righty. Well, I think that's going to do it for us this Monday. You can find us on Apple, Google, and Spotify, the podcasts, where you find your favorite ones. We're there. Also, spokesman.com. That's the newspaper website. Click on the Zags icon. You'll get all the coverage, and you'll get our podcast if you so choose. So tune in, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your relatives to tune in. And, hey, we'll catch you next Monday. I'll be in Vegas. Foxy will probably be in that very seat there, and we'll get you set up for the WCC tournament. Thanks for joining us.